Welcome to our 10 a.m. on Friday Central Time presentation on the Blandings turtle. My name is Pam Otto. I'm with the St. Charles Park District, and I'm thrilled today to introduce Dan Thompson. He's an ecologist with the DuPage County Forest Preserve District, and he has been for the last over a decade now, Dan.
Yeah.
Been working with this intriguing species called the Blandings turtle. We're going to run through some slides and then introduce you to a member of this species as we go along with our program today. Dan, I think I'll turn it over to you.
All right, well, thank you. Appreciate you all, your interest in this. The Blandings turtle is a native species of Illinois, but it is an endangered species. I think when people always talk about endangered species, they're always talking about something on another continent halfway around the world. The reality is we have them right in our own backyards. This is a perfect example. This image you're looking at is a male adult Blandings turtle. So some of the characteristics of the Blandings turtle, the most obvious is the solid yellow throat and chin, and the big dome shell kind of looks much like a army helmet. I guess we can probably move to that. This kind of is a range of the Blandings turtle habitat in North America. You can see their main core is centered around the Great Lakes. And the sad reality is pretty much throughout its range in the US, the states, and the Canadian provinces where they do occur, they're considered, in many cases, endangered, some cases threatened, in other cases, some of the best cases, they're just a species of special concern. So sad reality is they are struggling throughout most of their range in North America. Blandings with that dome shell are not as streamlined, certainly not like a soft shell turtle that's more a riverine system species that is used to the currents. These guys are weaker swimmers, so they prefer more slower moving currents, more stagnant water, so well vegetated marshes are critical habitat for them. Kind of showing you some of the impacts, why they're endangered. The amazing thing is we have fossil records of these Blandings turtles dating back well over 3 million years, and they are almost unchanged from that time to now. So how have they survived on this planet for so long and done so well? And the real reason is human impacts. First and foremost, we're just flat out destroying their habitat. That's the biggest impact. But we're also degrading habitat by inadvertently releasing exotic species, moving them around, and also pollution. And then you run into collection, illegal harvest, and things of that matter that are impacting their population. The image you're seeing right now is just an aerial photo taken in 1954 in DuPage County. And so you can see some nice marsh complexes here. But at the same time, already there's been some dramatic changes to the upland terrestrial habitat, and so that has already probably had some setback to the population, but the marsh complexes are still doing well. But with the advent of field tiles and such too, in many cases the marshes were just flat out drained and habitat was lost. But to kind of give you another image, we'll show you the same image, what this area looked like in 2003.
So basically, Dan, what we're looking at here, this is all farmland.
Yes.
Right back, we're talking, 60 years ago?
Yep.
And prior to this, this was all wetlands. So the Blandings turtles could walk all around here. But even 60 years ago, their habitat had changed a lot.
Yes.
And now, what we're looking at, same shot today. So there was one major change going from wetlands to agriculture, and now from the farm fields to subdivisions. Is there really any habitat here?
And if you look at it now, the marshes have been altered to detention basins. They're just bowls of water. The structure, the habitat, it's essentially all gone. And then too, again, with the Blandings turtles, they like to move around a lot. So they might be in one part of the marsh one year, they may move to another marsh. And so they move around an awful lot. And, that unfortunately doesn't bode well for a species in urbanized settings. It certainly makes a lot of sense for species survival is to be able to move around and utilize what's on the landscape to your advantage. But in an urbanized setting, moving around between these wetland complexes now. Look at all the roads they'd have to cross, the chance of them safely making it across. Not going to happen, but reality is we already know they're gone because the habitat has been altered so dramatically. They're just not here anymore. So just kind of give you a little update of the program, how this came about. In 1987 through 1990, there was a county-wide sweep in DuPage County of the reptile and amphibian species. During that survey, they found Blanding's turtles here and there in various isolated populations. So they decided, let's go look again more closely at these Blanding's turtles. And so in 1994, they surveyed the Blanding's turtles. And when they surveyed it, what was really striking to them is what we're finding are middle-aged, older turtles. There are no juveniles, no subadults, no hatchlings. So clearly we have problems with the population dynamics. Recruitment is failing. And so that instigated the 1996 Head Start initiative. And by 1999, the state listed it as a threatened species. 2001, we actually went out and started tracking the nesting behaviors of the females, and that's a real eye-opener to see the severe impacts we were getting from raccoon predation and some of the other predators. And sadly, in 2009, the state listed it as endangered because they're really hanging on by their teeth, and we have to act and act now.
Dan, the map you showed us, you're based in DuPage County, your research is in DuPage County. How far out around the Chicago area does the Blanding's turtle range extend? They areas where they could,
Yeah, they're definitely found in all the collar counties in the Chicago region. So they're definitely in Lake, McHenry County. They go out as far as, Rockford, Winnebago County, but you'll even find them up Joe Davies County along the Mississippi River. So yes, they're found throughout most of northern Illinois. I think by the time you get to central Illinois, they start to taper off. Okay. And they do seem to like somewhat cooler climates too.
So there are maybe not everything is quite as bleak as the subdivisions.
No, certainly the habitat has not been altered further in some other areas, but still their numbers are not doing well, and that is again a combination of many factors. So we haven't seen the outright loss of the habitat, but we've definitely seen the degradation through exotic species, some of the pollution, a lot of exotic species move in, take over. They're more shallow rooted, so they erode more quickly. So then you start having riverbanks sloughing off, you get more sediment into the system. That actually has impact on a lot of the prey sources. So it's just
a cascade of things
going
on.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So this is just an image of Blanding's turtle, and this is how we track them. We actually epoxy transmitters to their shell. It doesn't harm them. They move around, and you can see this is in a nice little wet marsh, wet prairie area here, and you can see how it had recently been burned, and of course burning is a natural part of the ecosystems here. Blandings obviously have adapted to it, but yes, they do sometimes suffer from even management practices such as this.
In terms of not being able to get out of the way?
Yeah, I mean, more often than not, best burn seasons, the turtles are not as active, but it certainly happens. Back years ago, when you had unbroken habitat just ranging for miles and miles, you have these big, broad sweeping fires moving across the landscape, and certainly turtles were killed, but the reality was they were out and they're in such good numbers, they were able to recoup those losses. Now, because they're in such small numbers, any loss is very difficult to withstand nowadays.
It's look at that gorgeous color. That's amazing.
Yeah, they're really beautiful when you see them out in the wild.
Oh boy.
Yes. Predators, this is another big issue with these turtles. And it's not like, again, it's all about harmony. And when we come in and alter the landscape so dramatically, we change the balance of things. So what you're seeing here are what are frequently referred to as mesopredators, and a lot of people are frequently calling them subsidized predators, especially with the possums, raccoons, and skunk, because of the fact that we've taken away their larger end predators that are keeping them in check. So they're kind of running unchecked. And on top of it, they are finding food resources in all these urbanized settings and shelter. So we're providing them homes and food, and we've taken away their predators. So their population numbers are much higher now than they were before settlers came in and started the change of everything.
So our suburban diversity is out of whack.
Yes.
And yeah, I know raccoons, skunks, and possum, any suburban neighborhood is going to be loaded with them.
Yes.
A mink, I think, are a neat animal in that a lot of people don't realize how common they are.
Yes.
They're as a weasel, they're fierce predators, and I don't know what it is about our local ecosystems that seems to be favoring them as well. But gosh, even without seeing the actual mink, we see signs of their predation, and they're just, it's an interesting part of the local ecosystems that I think is often overlooked.
It is.
We've all had these guys in our garbage cans, the raccoons, the skunks, and the possums.
Yeah, the mink keep a pretty low profile. They're a very cryptic species, so you don't see them very readily, but they are pretty much everywhere. So they definitely have an impact. But by far, raccoon is our biggest nemesis for the turtles, just because of the fact that they go after all life stages. They are very proficient at finding the nests. When the female walks away, you'd be hard pressed to even tell she was ever there. But we also don't have the nose and the sense of smell that the raccoons do, and so maybe they can't see the disturbance, but they can definitely smell that there's been recent changes in the soil. There's the fresh disturbed soil smells there, but also the eggs, and they're able to locate that. Skunks are very proficient at that as well, but the raccoons are able to find the nests, eat the eggs. They'll eat and kill juveniles, and on occasion even go after and kill adults, because they are very intelligent species, and mom will train her young and pass on learned behavior from previous generations even. So that's a hard cycle to break, and I know they've had a lot of issues with that, even with sea turtles, where they actually started culling raccoons and saw the survival of the sea turtle nests and eggs skyrocket because of that. And it's one of those things, I think they just are in tune with nature, and so they're focusing on their prey base, what's most available at a given time, what's most abundant, easiest to find. And so during turtle nesting season, it's turtle eggs, and so they'll go after that, and they're very effective at it. Here's a couple of our Head Start turtles. Head starting is a term where we actually are bringing in the gravid or pregnant females. We'll have them nest, we'll collect the eggs from them, and we incubate the eggs, and we raise the turtles for a couple of years, sometimes release them as hatchlings, but these are actually two of our 2-year-old protocol turtles, so we actually raised them for 2 years in captivity, getting them big enough that their shell's strong enough to withstand predators. And here's a case where, yes, they've both been attacked by predators. You can see it's kind of hard to pick out, but the plaster on the bottom part of the turtle shell is, you can see a lot of punctures and scrapes from teeth.
It's like we're holding it like a Big Mac and trying to take a bite.
Somebody was chewing on it like it was a rawhide bone. And, the turtle did what it needed to, used its shell, it protected the turtle, and the turtle's, surviving. This turtle on the right, you can see the shell actually isn't in terribly bad shape, but the antenna has been chewed up and frayed, and so it definitely has been in the grasp of a predator. Here's an all too common sight that we see out in the nesting areas. And you can see the excavated hole where the nest was, and then all around the outer edge of that is the shell remains. And see, this is definitely not a case where the turtles hatched out, everything's good, because the shells would remain in the ground. The hatchlings would emerge from the shell, they dig their way out, and you never even see the shells. These were eggs that were pulled out of the nest, eaten, bitten into, and then the shell itself is frequently left there, and then it dries and desiccates and just curls up. So you can see these are all turtle eggs, and nothing left.
Dan, I don't know if all of our friends out here have seen turtle eggs. They're a little bit smaller than a ping pong ball, right? They're roundish,
Yes.
and the shell is different from a bird egg, right?
Yes, it's they're all a little bit different, but you know, in some cases, very much like chickens. I would say the species we have, snapping turtles and soft-shell turtles, are spherical, so
Okay.
they're like ping pongs. Painted turtles, red-eared sliders, blandings are more oval shaped,
Okay.
and they are calcified, so they are fairly firm, but you know, doesn't take much pressure to break them open.
Okay.
And so this is what you'll see over and over again. And so frequently we can kind of come out and judge what it was, possibly just based on the shell remains, whether it was spherical or oval. Then we can kind of break it down between that, but it's really sometimes hard to judge
What kind of a nest it was.
whether it's painted or blandings or red-eared slider, but sometimes the numbers may give it away a little bit.
Yeah, how many eggs would normally be in a blandings turtle nest versus, say, a snapping?
Well, that's a great question. Blandings turtle, on average, is probably about 12 to 13 eggs, so it's very not, you know, not a lot of eggs that they're putting out there. They're not a prolific species, whereas like a soft shell or snapping turtle, you know, that could be sometimes 50 eggs, maybe
Wow.
even more, in a really big female's nest. So that's one of those things. It's like the blandings turtle's suffering. It's endangered. So why are, like, say, painted turtles, which is probably more comparable to a blandings, why are they still fairly
Doing so
common?
well.
Why are the snappers still doing well when I'm seeing their nests getting hit just as hard? And it may be one of those cases. Look at the snappers with you know 50 some odd eggs in nests. You know, how many nests are out there surviving? I pretty much can tell you, very, very few. But maybe with the numbers game, that's just enough to keep the snappers going. But then what about the painted? And the interesting thing with the painted is they actually are very common species that actually do multiple clutching. So they're nesting in May and June just like everybody else. The snappers, the blandings, the soft shells, the red-eared sliders, the painteds, they're all nesting at that time frame. But the painteds are, again, a double clutcher. So they're actually going to have another clutch coming possibly at the late part of July, early part of August. And as I was telling you, the raccoons key in on what's most abundant at a given time. So it's only a theory of mine, but you know, by that second clutch, raspberries, blackberries, mulberries, other things are starting to become very abundant on the landscape. And so I'm guessing the raccoons are not focusing on turtle eggs anymore. Now, if they happen to come across the nest, I'm sure they'll take advantage of it, but that's not their main focus anymore. They're going after the berries and some of these other. So I'm guessing that maybe that second clutch has a better survival odd with the painted turtles. So that might be why they're still doing well.
And I gotta say, Pam, they're not putting all their eggs in one basket. Right?
Absolutely not. Exactly. That's perfect. So here's again, size, you know, grow them big, get them out there, but that doesn't always help. Here's a case of a fairly large, I guess, 3-year-old, very strong shell, easily able to withstand predators, but it still failed. And, you know, sometimes it's husbandry issues. The longer we have a turtle in captivity, if we handle it, everything else, slowly habituation occurs. They become less weary, less fearful. We've dulled their natural instincts to be wary of predators, and so maybe we've kind of artificially contributed to this. So, you know, one of our new protocols is to try to avoid, you know, handling the turtles as much as possible. And ideally, we want to start incorporating natural rearing, where we actually have self-made marsh that, you know, is controlled, predator-proof, but we'll let them rear.
They can get used to these outdoor surroundings.
Yeah.
They're going to spend the rest of their lives in and not be completely surprised.
Exactly. It's more a soft release technique where they're going to be growing in a more natural setting, but we're also not handling them.
Well, I'm looking at the shell, Dan, and is that a hinge?
It is a hinge. So much like, you know, there's a lot of similar traits with box turtles and blandings turtles. And I think it's just one of those evolutionary things over time is when you read about blandings turtles, they're frequently listed as semi-terrestrial. And that's true. They do spend a lot of time on land. I don't think they're doing a lot of foraging, though. I think it just has to do with a lot of their thermal regulation and such. But the fact that they do spend a lot of time on land and they do move around a lot from marsh to marsh, uh, they're doing a lot of walking on land to get between those bodies of water. And so I think it's just one of those evolutionary things. The more terrestrial you become as a turtle or tortoise, you become more domed. And the reason for that doming is, the flatter you are, the easier it is to apply a lot of pressure onto that shell. So a predator grabbing, say, like a soft-shell turtle, that shell is very flat. So they can apply a lot of pressure and actually probably break the shell. The more domed it is, you have to extend your jaw much further open, and you just physically cannot exert any kind of force. The more you open your jaw, it's a matter of physics. So it's a defense technique. But then, as Pam alluded to, the blandings also have a hinge on their plastron, so that enables them to actually, when they pull in tight, they can pull that hinge up and close their shell, much more tightly. So there's very little access for a predator to get in there and try to get at soft tissue. We do frequently see a lot of the blandings turtles have nub tails because the raccoon they can tuck it in pretty well, but the dexterity of the raccoon's hands, they're able to, with their fingers, get in there and pull that tip of that tail off and chew that off.
Wow.
But again, they'll survive, and so it's just one of those evolutionary things. And then the box turtle being completely terrestrial, their hinge, they actually sealed completely, so they're just like a rock. And they're completely enclosed, and so that's their survival strategy, because obviously turtles are not going to outrun any of their predators. So
oh boy.
Yeah, again, human pressures. We've already seen how we've destroyed habitat, just flat out taking it away. But there's other things. Fishing. It's a great sport, but you're not always going to catch what your intended target is. And here's a case where one of our turtles, you can see in the X-ray, it's got a transmitter on it. This is one of our female blandings, and somebody probably had a big night crawler or something on the hook, and she came up, swallowed it, and unfortunately died from taking in that hook. And it's, again, the person fishing was not trying to catch her, but these are some of the some of the losses that still can occur. Road mortality is another big issue, and boy, especially in our area, we're seeing speed limits going up, roads going from 2 to 4 lanes, so they have a much broader area to try to cross, and traffic volume just going, building extremely, so there's very few breaks in traffic. It's nearly impossible for some of these turtles to make it across the road. And the sad reality is, the way people drive, people are driving unattentivedly, because really there's no excuse to hit a turtle. I know squirrels and rabbits can dart out in front of you and you can't react fast enough, and that's sadly, but it's understandable. Turtles, no, they're not going to dart out in front of you. You should be able to see them, but when you're not driving with much attention,
or your coffee, or
people are doing everything but driving anymore. That's going to happen. Or if you're tailgating the guy ahead of you and the guy ahead of you sees it, but you're right on their bumper, you might be lined up right over to run it over, and you won't have reaction time then. So again, drive safely and
keep an eye out.
Yeah, those should be avoidable. Here's another case, adult female, full of eggs, just coming up the nest, right along the shoulder of the road, and boom, gets run over. And sad reality is too, in today's society, I think there is a major disconnect with a lot of the younger kids and younger generations not growing up and exploring the outdoors and really understanding or appreciating it. And there's been many cases. I think Syracuse was just doing a survey, taking foam turtles, putting them on the road, and they'd have students there counting how many cars would hit them, trying to estimate, what is the likeliness of turtles making it across, what would the mortality rates be. And to their shock, they were actually watching cars swerve purposely trying to hit them. And it's kind of a sad reality of where we are in today's society. again, why we really need to get people outside, really understand the fact that, yeah, we've got a lot of science and technology behind us, but reality is we are living organisms just like anything else out there, and we are part of the whole ecosystem in the bio chain. And how we treat this planet is how it's going to be able to support us in the future. And right now, we're not doing a very good job.
Perryman just asked the question, is there anything that's raising awareness for these turtles? Deb, we're going to get to that in a little bit, and that's kind of, Dan is the scientist on the project. He's the lead researcher in the Blandings project, but some of the other partners, including us here at St. Charles, we are trying to get the word out, and we do have a couple of nice success stories that we're going to get to in just a little bit. So yeah, and webinars too. Getting the word out. This is a great way to reach a lot of people.
So obviously, whenever you're doing any kind of research, you want to identify a given individual because it tells you so much about habitat selection, range, and most importantly, survivability. So if you find a dead turtle, you know what its fate was. So what we try to do is we try to identify all our turtles, and what you see here is a microchip. It's the same type of chip that they frequently use in cats and dogs. This gives off a little signal, and so we have a little device that'll read that signal, and it'll give us a series of letters and numbers, and so we know exactly who that turtle is based on that microchip. Another technique we use, though, because microchips are not always kept in the turtle, frequently rejection does occur, and sometimes it can be 10 years plus it's been in the turtle and all of a sudden gone.
Pops out.
Yeah, and so rejection is very normal, and so we have backups. We'll take plastron photos. This is the bottom part of the shell, but as you can see, each turtle has a unique pattern. It's no different than us and our fingerprints, and marine biologists frequently taking photos of whale flukes, the tail. Pattern on the bottom of the tail is very unique, so as the whale's starting to dive, they take the photo and then they can identify that whale from that image. We do the same thing with the turtles. Here's an image of a adult female, and you can see she's gravid, she's full of eggs. As Pam alluded to, you can see that dark line running right through her. That's where the hinge of the bottom part of the shell, the plastron, where that is hinged apart, so that gives that turtle the ability to tuck in its shell more readily. But as you can see, boy, those eggs, again, not very prolific, but they really fill up that female.
About 15 in there, it looks like?
Yeah, so it was a very good clutch. This is just a photo of one of the females during our nesting surveys, where we started to learn more about where the turtles were choosing to nest. And we were starting to see the real serious impacts of how readily the predators were finding them and how severe it was. It is pretty dramatic. No problem.
Meanwhile, at Willowbrook.
Yes. This is Willowbrook Wildlife Center. It's in Glen Ellen, Illinois. It's a facility of the DuPage County Forest Preserve. This is actually, I think, one of the first wildlife rehab facilities in the nation. And so this is a great resource for us to have. We do have a vet on staff and a lot of animal care people. So this is where we'll bring our gravid females when it's time to nest, because we pull them before they nest because we've seen how severe the predation is, and it's a matter of time too. If we leave them out there, I definitely want to continue doing some more tracking in the future. But when we leave them out there, it's almost like we need a 24-hour vigil on them, because there's frequently we're tracking, and all of a sudden, boy, we leave a few gaps in there, and the next thing you know, we come back, and during that gap, the turtle came out, nested, and we missed her. And those eggs are just too precious to lose.
Wow.
So what we'll do there at Willowbrook is set up maternity pens. These are older photos of some of our older pens that we've improved the design over years, and we still are looking for something more permanent. But for those who don't realize that turtles are very good climbers, and believe it or not, we've had them going up the chain link fence, so now we have to put barriers along there to keep them off. But what we'll do is when we take the x-rays, we'll get the egg clutch count, and then we'll put females with different egg clutch sizes in the same pen together. This way, if multiple turtles nest overnight, with different clutch sizes, we know which eggs belong to which female. And that's very important for genetic diversity and maintaining our database and knowing the turtle's lineage as that turtle grows older.
Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but these the trees there at the side of the pens, are those Christmas trees?
Those
that
are
people
old
have donated?
Christmas trees that are
I've
donated.
heard that you can
yes.
take your old holiday trees and have them have a second life.
Exactly, and so they're actually probably serving a much
there.
greater purpose now, helping out
Neat.
some endangered species. So yeah, it's a great way to get some extra life out of something that's
cool.
And so here's a case of some of our females in the pens, digging their nests. And this is what we like to see. Let them nest on their own. It's a more natural process for them. But again, too, they know this isn't exactly where my typical habitat is and where my true home is. But for the most part, most of the females take to it. Unfortunately, though, it's one of those things. We don't want to keep these turtles in captivity very long. We want them out in their natural habitat. So if they don't nest within a certain time frame, we'll actually induce them into labor, or unfortunately some years when we have nesting season again during June, we might have a really wet, rainy season, so the ground's a little too saturated and the females don't like it because they know the ground's a little too wet for their eggs. So then we do have to induce the majority of them then. And so when we induce them, we give them a dosage of oxytocin just like they use with humans, and get the contractions going and we get the eggs coming.
Wow.
And this graph kind of just gives an idea of what we've been doing over the years. We've definitely improved our hatch success. The red line on the top kind of shows how it's fluctuated over the years. But you can see how we're much more consistent over the last few years, hatching out around 85 to 90% of our eggs frequently. In fact, last year we actually hatched out 100% of our fertile eggs.
Wow.
And so, it's just a matter of time and our techniques. We've learned what works and we've been improving. The blue line is the number of turtles. So you can see that's somewhat been increasing as our hatch success increases, but you can see some dips right kind of in the middle of the graph. And that's a direct result of losing females out in the wild. In this time frame, we've lost probably 6 adult females, maybe 1 or 2 to natural cause. The others were predation. And so when we lose this, we're already talking about a very small population base. So this really has a dramatic impact on us and our chances of success, because we need to put out so many turtles a year to ensure that we're replicating the population, because the reality is there is no parental care with these turtles. Mom digs the nest, she walks away, and there is going to be, we've already seen the predation on the nest, how severe that is. But again, that's kind of artificial because I think we've destroyed a lot of their natural nesting grounds. So instead of them being scattered around the landscape, they're more congregated and they're much more easily accessed by the predators. So these are things we have to correct. But the end result is, each one is so precious. And when we lose a female, we've lost the rest of her eggs for, what would have been her natural lifespan. And that impacts how many turtles we're going to be able to put out in the future. And it's one of those things, are we putting enough out there to sustain these populations? Again, too, it's very important about genetics. Each female, each turtle out there has unique genetic makeup. And again, too, I think we know the more diverse your genetic makeup, the stronger your population is to withstand changes in the environment. And believe me, we're starting to see major changes. And, there's pathogens and diseases out there. And we're talking possible changes in climate and other things. These are going to have serious ramifications on these populations in the future. And so the stronger your genetic base is, the better our populations are going to withstand these pressures. So these are our incubators. This is what we use to actually incubate the turtle eggs. And the neatest thing about it is the fact that we can determine the sex of the baby from that egg based on the temperature we incubated at. So I can take any single egg and I can decide this can either be male or I can make that same egg female based on the temperature. It's as you can kind of see, the typical temperature range is 30.5 degrees centigrade Celsius for females, 26.5 degrees Celsius for males. So it's always, people are always like, what was that again? When warmer was, which was which? And so the easy phrase to remember is hot chicks and cool dudes. And so if you want to remember that, but that's simply how it works. It's really neat. And so the warmer, slightly warmer temperatures make it female. A little bit cooler makes it male. The big factor though is since we are dealing with smaller population base, I need higher reproductive capabilities. So because of that, we are incubating 2/3 of our eggs as females, getting more females out there to have higher reproductive rate, get more young out there. So this is a turtle egg, and as you can see the silhouette of the turtle in there. On the right side, you can see the head and the neck, and then the front leg is there, and then most of it's shell, and you can kind of see the tail and the rear leg are kind of all lumped together, so you can't really see any definition, but it's really neat because you can actually see the turtle moving around. And it's a technique called candling. I mean, this has been going on for ages. People have used it, and obviously because eggs are fairly translucent, so what they would do years ago to see if their poultry eggs and such are fertile, hold it up to a candle, and with the light in the backdrop, you can see the silhouette and see whether it's a fertile egg or not.
Now, Dan, I've always heard that reptile eggs are pretty sensitive to movement. Like when a bird lays an egg, they turn it quite a bit.
Yes, exactly.
Whereas when a reptile lays an egg, like you said, the parental care is over. Mom walks away, that egg is going to sit there in the soil. Is there any trick to candling a turtle egg?
Well, essentially, what we do, you're absolutely right. I've heard both sides of the story, but reality is a reptile egg, when they're put in there, they're buried, they're not turned, so they stay exactly oriented as they were. And I think the turtle develops based on that orientation. So to actually turn it during the process of developing could be harmful, but I've also heard some people have done studies where they've actually turned the eggs and things still seem to be fine.
Huh? Okay.
But again, that's probably a pretty limited study, and end result is that you just want to be careful, since why would you even want to turn an egg? So when we pull it out of the nest, we actually will ID the egg with a pencil right on the shell, and so we know what the top is, and we try to keep that orientation on the top side. And so when we pull it out to candle, we're keeping that orientation.
You're not
we're
flipping it all around.
We're not flipping it around, and we put it right back in. The two major factors, as we kind of talked about already, temperature to make sure we're getting the proper sex we're looking for, but also to make sure we don't go too far out of the range, make it too hot and actually cook the eggs and kill the embryo, and also maybe dropping too low. And maybe, I don't know if it's possible to even stagnate out development because it's actually gotten too cool. So we graph the temperatures during the day. And you can see this was supposed to be a male incubator, and our mean temperature was right on the money, but there were two errant blips, and who knows what some of this was. Sometimes it might have been a faulty situation where it was taking a reading, and maybe someone had opened up the incubator and they didn't clear the temperature, so when you let room temperature in, it will bring that down quickly, which it can sustain for some, a little while. But if it's telling us this is a long duration, then that'd be a problem. But that really warm blip would concern me a little bit. But since we're right around female range and short duration, not a big deal. Here's another one. This was a female incubator, and we're targeting 30.5 degrees. Our mean was pretty close, but this was not as consistent as that other graph, and you can see it actually dropped down into male temperatures early on in the development in a little bit longer duration too. So does this mean we possibly could have incubated and hatched out some males instead of females? Now the interesting thing too with the temperature the females develop faster and will actually hatch out about a week before their brothers. But in the nest, they all wait and hatch out together, because if the females are emerging first and the boys are still in there, that fresh soil disturbance is going to draw the predators, and the boys wouldn't stand a chance.
Cool dudes.
So yeah, they wouldn't be so cool. So there is some kind of synchronized emergence, and you definitely see that with the sea turtles too, where they all are coming out all at the same time, because they know they're going to be running a gauntlet along the beach of predators. But if they're all coming out all at once, they just overwhelm the predators, and just by sheer numbers,
some of them are going to make it through.
So here's a little photo of one of our turtles emerging out of an egg, and that's a really great time of year. Makes it all worthwhile to be enduring the mosquitoes and the heat and all the cattail pollen and everything else, slugging through the marsh, tracking these turtles. But here's our future generation. And the exciting thing is, this year we actually found 3 females that we had released as we hatched out and raised them for 2 years and then released them. And this year we found 3 of them. We didn't even know they were out there. We hadn't seen them since we released them. And lo and behold, they were breeding size and they were full of eggs. Okay. So we hatched them out this year. So we got our first wild grand turtles this year.
Yay!
So that's a really big step. But again, too, the head starting, this is a band-aid. This is putting the turtles out there, putting them out there, and maintaining enough numbers to keep the population going. Reality is, though, for us to have future success, we have to start addressing all these problems out in the environment. What we can do, improving the quality of the habitat, reducing the predator impacts, and correcting a lot of these issues, the road mortalities. That's going to be the hard challenge. And so this at least is buying us time until we can start correcting those. But the sad reality is we're putting these turtles out in a fairly hostile environment still. So once the turtles hatch out, we'll take measurements on their shell length, and how much they weigh. And this way we can kind of keep track of them and see that they're prospering and still continuing to grow. And this is what it looks like when they first hatch out. We put them in wet towels and little individual trays. You can see they're still there with their eggs. I think you can see the one egg here. We have the number on there, yeah. So that number corresponds to its mother. So that happened to be from turtle 28, but it was the 3rd egg of her clutch. And so when we go into the database, we'll know what that turtle is. And when the turtles hatch out, we just number them 1 through whatever. Then our database will reflect, well, we know that that was from this egg, which means it was from this mother. This egg was in this incubator, so it should either be a male or female based on what incubator it came out of. So we'll know a lot about this turtle. And then about 10 days or so, when their shell's starting to firm up just a little bit more, we'll actually put a number, we'll number their shell corresponding to their hatch order. And so here's turtle number 7, and it will be known as that turtle. So like if that was from this year, this would be turtle 14-007. So this is the 7th turtle to hatch out in 2014. And then our database will reflect who its mother was and what sex it was incubated at, and we'll have that data. And again, it's very important because we are starting a captive breeding program too, where we're actually saving offspring of females that we find deceased in the field. Again, I was talking about how we're already dealing with an endangered species, so we're already dealing with low numbers. So with the low numbers also is probably lower genetic diversity. And as we continue to lose these adults, their genetic lineage is lost unless some of their young have already survived, which we don't really know. But here's a case where when we have some in captivity, we do know that we can at least save some of their young, breed them in a captive setting, and release their young, and hopefully those young will contain some of that genetic material of that mother to keep that lineage going and keep our genetic diversity as best as we can. So here they are. We are feeding them. You can see they do get a pretty good dose of pellets in their diet, and that's obviously not very natural as a hatchling. these are very predatory individuals, and so anything moving, they're going to be going after that's smaller than them. So a lot of the aquatic invertebrates, particularly mosquito larvae, they love those. And so, you know, you put anything live in, they're after it right away. And it takes a little while for them to learn to eat the pellets. And, you know, pellets are easy and great, but we really want to try to give them as diverse of a diet as possible. These are some of the setups where we'll house these turtles. They'll be in, you know, fairly shallow tubs. They've got their basking areas so they can thermoregulate. We do give them heat, UV lights too, so they're getting UVA and UVB, so they're getting nutrients from the lighting, but it still doesn't mimic, and it's not as good as natural sunlight. So here's Brookfield Zoo. This is one of our partners, so this is in the Hamill Family Zoo, and again too, as Deb asked, you know, what about awareness? And we do need to get that word out. It's so critical, and so all our partners really have a strong education component to their participation with this program. And so here's, you know, they've got a little bit to let people know about the blanding turtles that they have there, and, you know, the fact that they're endangered and some of the perils. And, you know, we're always looking to improve this and get more word out. And so, yeah, this is also Brookfield Zoo. And so, as I was saying before too, you know, it's so much nicer to rear these turtles in a natural setting. So the upper left-hand corner you can see is a big cage, but essentially this is out being at Brookfield Zoo. It's placed out in the Dragonfly Marsh now, and so it's out in a natural setting where we'll take about 12 turtles, put them in there for the summer, and let them grow naturally. And so they're getting natural sunlight, being in a natural system. They've got a lot of prey base moving in and out of the cage, but they're artificially fed as well to supplement, make sure they're getting enough nutrients. On the lower bottom right there is actually a nice little marshy pond that we are now housing our captive breeding females. So again, they're just living their life now, year round. They hibernate or brumate. Brumation is the true technical term for reptiles hibernating, but they'll spend the winter under the bottom of that pond. And it's pretty astounding too for a reptile. They breathe air just like we do, but you know what? They're going to be spending 3-4 months under the ice, underwater. Even though they breathe air, they shut their metabolism down to almost nothing. They are able to actually pull water in and out of their cloaca, which essentially is their rear end. But they apparently the lining in their tract, they can actually pull oxygen out through their inner tissue. And so they can get some oxygen that way, but you know, amazingly, they just kind of shut their metabolism down to almost nothing. So they don't really need much oxygen, but it's astounding some of the adaptations these creatures have. And then here's another one.
You know, Hickory Knolls, that's where I'm based, and we jumped onto the program when our building was built in 2011. Much to do with what you were saying, Deb, raising that awareness about turtles. In the lobby of our center, we have an indoor turtle pond, and you know, people when they view it for the first time, they want to know how many turtles are in there and you know, what kind they are. This is almost like a holding pen, would you call it, Dan? Because the turtles, there's really only one resident blanding turtle that we have. She was a breeding program dropout, would you call it?
Well, yes.
She had some issues reproducing, and it was decided that it was in her best interest to just become an education turtle. So what's great about her is that we can handle her. The other turtles being part of the program, we don't want to be exposing them to a lot of different environments and a lot of handling when really we need to guard their health as closely as possible. But number two, as we affectionately call her, she goes to schools. In fact, she visited with about 375 middle schoolers last week. So she's living in the pond year-round. She does not undergo brumation in the winter anymore, as the other turtles do. But people come in here into our lobby, they see that pond, and they're immediately asking questions because it's a turtle that they have not ever, most people have never seen before. They can notice that high dome and that yellow chin, and they want to know more about it. I think we're seeing some success with that in that over the last year we've had calls from 2 different people in 2 different areas who've actually spotted landing turtles by the side of the road, and they were able to recognize this isn't a snapping turtle, this isn't a painted turtle, what is this? And they called here, we called Dan, and those turtles were able to be recorded. They were unknown individuals, and one was in DeKalb, correct? And one was just a couple miles west of the center here. A woman was driving, and she thought, oh my gosh, this sure looks like one of those landing turtles we've seen, and sure enough, it turned out to be.
Yeah.
I don't know if at this point, if we want to introduce one of the residents here. I'm going to lean back here for a second. Dan, I'll hand her over to you, the expert, but this is not number 2, this is number 3, who is, she's experiencing what we call dry docking for a couple of days. Dan has a great saying about Blanding's turtles. They're a very curious kind of turtle, and I remember, Dan, right after we started talking with you, you described them as a turtle that is always, kind of getting into trouble.
Yes.
And if they don't find any trouble somewhere, they'll make trouble elsewhere. We've had turtles climb over the wall. We've had to install kind of guardrails around the sides, not 1 to keep kids out, but 2 to keep the turtles in, because they do like to go exploring. They're just by nature a very mobile species. Well, number 3, we noticed the other day that there were some drops of blood in the enclosure, and it turns out she caught a toenail on a rock. Apparently ripped the whole nail out, and the blood was coming out. So by dry docking, or taking her out of the pond, we were able to get the bleeding to stop, and she's going through her healing process. She's probably going to be able to join the turtles again in another day or so, but we just wanted to make sure that everything was okay. But check out some of the things Dan was pointing out. This domed shell, the speckled pattern on the back. One thing that's obvious looking at a captive raised species versus those wild individuals is the coloration. That bright yellow chin indoors, it becomes a little bit muted. I have a feeling part of that has to do with the lack of natural sunlight. Part of it has to do with diet. We are now making some changes to the captive turtles diet. We've been adding some pelleted foods that have a little bit more beta carotene, more pigment in them. And then we've started a volunteer program here. Here at Hickory Knolls, we call it turtle wrangling, and it sounds goofy, but we found kids and parents too really enjoy it. They come in and they basically check out a turtle, and they take it for a walk. We don't have the staff time here to keep track of these guys wandering outside, and even though they're a fairly large turtle and they have that big dome, they do disappear on you, almost. In fact, we thought this summer, we thought, oh my gosh, where did it go? And it just, that coloration is so cryptic that it was in the grass, but it had literally disappeared in front of our eyes because of the way it camouflaged. But we found it. So turtle wranglers can come take these turtles outside. It's really not the the full sun, full day exposure that we would like. That's our ideal. We're looking now at pulling some budget money to get some outdoor pens where we can have outdoor time during the day. We'd still bring them in at night because we do have a lot of those predators, those raccoons and things that could be a problem. But yeah, number 3 is what would you say? 6 years old, 7 years old?
Yeah, probably around that ballpark.
So not quite mature enough to enter the breeding program, but well on her way. The turtles that are housed here at Hickory Knolls, they are all female. To the casual observer, I don't know that they would be able to tell in the wild whether they were seeing a male or a female. Certainly, if people ask questions, we can describe that. And if anybody out there is curious, a male turtle will have a much thicker and longer tail, whereas the female's tail is going to be more reduced, a little more streamlined, as Dan's showing you there.
You can see the tail's not all that thick. It's the cloaca for a female usually comes out right about the edge of the shell when you pull the tail tight. When you have a male, the tail's probably twice as thick and the cloaca extends well beyond the edge of the shell. The plastron on the female, you saw how they just fill up with eggs, and not like mammals, they can't distend their abdomen, so they've only got limited amount of space, so their plastron is fairly flat to give them as much surface area for the eggs, whereas the male, because the females are so domed, their plastron is going to be more concave, so they can actually fit up snug on the back of the female.
Neat, neat animals. You know, Dan, I just looked at the time. We've only got about 4 minutes. I know we've got some more slides, but I wonder too if anybody has any questions as we've been going along. We've had a couple come up here, but certainly if anyone who's watching
Yes.
or listening in has any questions, feel free to type in. We'll get those answered as we finish through these last couple of slides.
So the Shed Aquarium, just another one of our partners helping us with water quality and some guidance on husbandry. We are partnering with a lot of the local universities, University of Illinois. Again, we are raising turtles with different temperatures, assuming we're getting different sexes, and so we actually took some endoscopes in to look at the sexual organs, and so you can see the ovaries up here on the top and the testes down here on the bottom for the different sexes, and taking some blood chemistry to kind of learn more about the turtle and some health issues. So it's great, you know, trying to ensure that, you know, our techniques are good, that can be translated to other people in the future doing this same work elsewhere. You know, they won't have to reinvent the wheel if we've got some proven techniques. As Pam was talking about, the difference between wild and captive, look at the coloration of the turtle on the left, how golden yellow that is. That's a wild turtle. It is one of our Head Start turtles, but it's been surviving out in the wild for, you know, a year or more, and there's one that's still in captivity, and just look at the difference.
Wow.
So we definitely have some issues that we want to try to correct and improve with our husbandry techniques. Wheaton College was doing some genetic work with some of our hatchlings, where we take entire clutches from a given female and run DNA analysis to see how many fathers are actually represented. There is probably there's probably some peak activity when breeding does occur, but overall when a male finds a female, he's going to try to breed with her. And so there is going to be multiple fathers represented, and we've definitely seen that in some of this work. And again, kind of as I alluded to earlier, we really need to get out there and reach the future and try to draw people more to the natural aspect of things and understand why it's important we need biodiversity and why we need to have a lighter footprint on the environment and be living more green. You know, everyone's just, I think we're so detached and we just think, oh, we've got so much technology, we can, you know, withstand anything, we can just overcome everything. And it's like, no, we are part of the same system that all these wildlife species and other organisms are a part of. We are part of that food chain, and we're all interconnected. And if we continually let species decline and disappear, the ecosystem itself, the health degrades, and that's going to affect our future.
Oh. It looks like we have one more question from Bill. It says, do you folks have a program of monitoring live nests in the wild that are found by the public? He's down in Mexico, and they do house for public health.
You know, that's a great point and something we certainly thought about. We do have a lot of technical problems as to where the turtles are nesting. In some cases, it's not public area for the public to have access to monitor, which kind of creates a lot of problems. But it's certainly something, I think it's a great question, and it's a great way to drum up support, you know, and allow people to be part of this process. When you're part of something, recovering a species like this, you really hold it more tightly, and I think that just would only strengthen people's participation in, you know, appreciation for saving this species and other species. So it's a great question, but sadly right now there's just a few too many complex issues allowing us to be able to do something like that at this time. But certainly things may change in the future.
Well, it looks like we're 11 o'clock, Dan. We're out of time today, but if anyone has any further questions, you can certainly feel free to reach Dan or myself. Dan, you want to give your contact info? Or
Yes, you could reach me at my email address is dthompson, THOMPSON @DuPageForest.org. So DuPage Forest, just one word, DuPageForest.org. So Dan, D. Thompson, DuPageForest.org.
And I'm Pam Otto, POTTO, at stcparks.org. It's been a pleasure participating today. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, that's too bad. No, I guess I should have brought that.